Hello and good evening to you, CFC family. This is Francis Kathambana. I'm a psychologist and a coach for winning couples. Now today, or this evening, I want us to cover an interesting topic about psycho-spiritual healing. And I'm going to talk about a bit of psychology, I'm going to talk about a bit of spiritual aspects, all of that from a psychological perspective. All right? So, as we begin, let me begin by asking a question. Catholics, how do we pray? How do we start our prayers? Yeah? Remember, we start in the name of the Father, of Son, Holy Spirit. Yeah? Good. That I want us to know that we begin with this part. Okay? Another question. How do you tell a prayerful Muslim? Now, I know this is not the right way of saying this, but if you notice that of late, we're getting more and more Muslims with a small patch over here. You know, when Muslims pray, yeah, they touch this part of the forehead to the floor. And so nowadays, we're beginning to see more and more of them having a small patch around here, showing that every time they are actually touching the floor, their head to the floor. Okay? Another question. How do you tell a Hindu? If you notice, most Hindus also have a red mark right over there. Okay? So right over there again. And then I am sure you've seen pictures of the enlightened Buddha. Yeah? And if you look at the pictures of the enlightened Buddha, again, they have a big light emanating from right in front of their forehead outwards. Okay? Allow me to go further. We have Jews, and when Jews pray, what do? They wear a cape, isn't it? It's called a skull cap, if I remember correctly. Right over here, yeah, covering right over here. The same one that the Pope actually uses. Again, a small cap that covers right over here. All right. So, what's this? What's all this? This part of the head, yeah, and prayer and religions, and all religions seem to have something around this part of the prayer, this part of the head. So it turns out that there is a part of the head right over here called the parietal lobe. And for a lot of us, for a lot of people who mistakes, like these guys who do yoga, these guys who do a lot of prayers, you know, when they're doing that and they do the images that they do for the head, the fMRIs, you know, this part of the brain lights up when they are involved in that deep spiritual activity. In fact, they say, some psychologists and some most psychologists actually say that when that part lights up, it's like there's a direct connection to God. You know, if you remember those old days when we had telephones and you needed a direct call. So when you're praying and that part of the brain lights up, then direct call. It has gone directly. So the study, right from 1994, there was a study around something called the biology of belief. Okay, where they were trying to figure out that connection between the body and spiritual activities and health. And people actually, right from 1994, they did discover that yes, it was already known that when you involve yourself in spiritual activities like prayer, like being part of a community in church, that you are a lot healthier, that you are you function better as a human being, as yeah. And then when they actually imaged the brain and actually started seeing where that part of what lights up when somebody is doing this prayer, Then they discover that activating the parietal lobe is actually what is the real thing when it comes to getting a better life, a better health, a better sense of well-being. Okay? Now, once we discover that, then we know that we can actually activate the parietal lobe. All we have to do is do these things that these people who practice spirituality actually do. So, for example, if we engage in deep, sincere prayer, when we are engaged in meditation, when we are engaged in, that feeling that comes when you're completely full of gratitude. Okay, these things tend to light up the parietal lobe. And once we are operating from that place where the parietal lobe is activated, then we start getting the benefits of that. We start looking younger. We reduce the possibilities of getting lifestyle diseases. We become healthier in so many ways. Yeah? Basically, engaging in those things that light up the parietal lobe means that we become healthier. And there are people who postulate that you actually engage your natural healing properties when you start lighting up your parietal lobe. All right? Now, it was also discovered that there are things that inhibit how the parietal lobe actually works. Yeah? And two of them. Number one is trauma. Number two is pain. So we know for a fact that if you're traumatized, then there are certain parts of our brain that we have less access to. The same way, if you're experiencing intense pain and it's all about survival, then the lower parts of the brain are activated, the higher parts of the brain are not, meaning that in a sense, when you're in a lot of pain, then the parietal lobe shuts down. And the less we activate something, the less it's available to us, right? When we talk about trauma, when we talk about pain, I'd like to say that to a very large extent, all of us have experienced pain as we are growing up. Being in this world that we are living in right now, we have to live with pain. We have to suffer through pain. Okay? So, and this diminishes our ability to activate the parietal lobe. Also, if we were to look at the current literature, more and more people are beginning to talk about something we call intergenerational trauma. And what is that? This is trauma that is passed down into generations. Yeah? So, for example, if your father was involved in a traumatic activity, it changes them or changes him in a certain way. And that trauma is passed on to you. If your mother was involved in a traumatic event, again, that pain changes them and is passed on to you one way or another. And please note, I'm not talking about genetics. I'm talking about trauma being passed on from one generation to the other. Now, we as Kenyans, we as people who've grown up in this part of the world, we are affected by trauma, and specifically the trauma around colonization. Okay? Our parents, or maybe our grandparents, our parents, all experienced trauma one way or another. The trauma of colonization. Okay? And it changed them. And what we have in us right now is the effects of that trauma, the one that they experienced, coming down to us. So if you look at emerging literature, especially around intergenerational trauma, you see that there's already a lot of documented studies that people who have not had any traumatic effects, but their grandparents or even great grandparents were involved in serious traumatic events, they actually start manifesting the effects of that trauma as if they themselves were there. So the link is already established. But those are what we now call the serious documented effects. But what about for the rest of the population? We're already seeing that, for example, in places where there have been slavery, there is higher mental health issues. We have higher mental health, physiological health issues, yeah, for the people, the subsequent generations, all right? The things which are very traumatic that have been documented in the world include racism, okay, slavery, and now we're beginning to talk about colonization, yeah. Places like in South Africa, the black population seems to have higher mental health issues than the white population. If you are to look at the United States, again, yeah, populations that have higher mental health issues are the black. If we were to look at places like in Canada, what we call First Nation populations, the original people of Canada, again, because they were relocated and colonized and everything taken away from them, they have higher aspects of drug abuse, alcoholism, and with that come the effects of on their bodies. They have higher lifestyle diseases, etc. So these things are already documented. Okay, so for us, what does that mean? We, at some level or another, also have been affected by the effects that our parents and grandparents experienced during colonization. And we're living that. We portray that. If we were to see, how does that play for us? In example, we have higher depression rates currently than previous generations. We have higher ADD diagnosis coming up right now. We have higher lifestyle diseases manifesting themselves right now than in previous generations. And please note, all these are effects, are to a certain extent linked to trauma and mental health, right? What does all this then mean? It means that as the generations pass by, we are less able to activate our parietal lobe, specifically because we are already traumatized, right? And we need to be able to get back to a place where we can activate the healing properties of the parietal lobe. If we were to look at mental health conditions like depression, yeah, instead of calling it a disorder, what if we called it a coping mechanism? Yeah, because we are affected in a certain way. Then, I would love to go into that discussion, but it's a long, yeah. But as a way of coping, we learn to depress aspects of us, which in later point in life becomes depression or is diagnosed as depression. The same with ADD, yeah. We learn to cope by either diverting our attention or becoming so hyperactive, yeah, because of the stresses that we are affecting, because of the trauma that we are living through. And therefore, later on in life, we get diagnosed with attention deficit disorder with hyperactivity or without. So for us to be able to heal ourselves, we need to start activating our parietal lobe. We need to start doing those things which activate that part of the brain that will give us better health, that will give us better spiritual outcomes, if I may say so. So what are some of these things? One, generally it has to be prayer. Yeah. And we have to be able to pray, and pray honestly and sincerely. Okay. Another thing that generally does a lot in terms of healing, yeah, is praise and worship. You know how we sing, yeah, and how we let joy out, and how we build together and get with people, and we are doing what is called praise and worship. That's a very, very, very powerful way of releasing some of the pain that we have due to trauma, and activating that part of the brain that activates our inner healing abilities, and therefore we're already healing ourselves. Okay, we talk about meditation now. If I remember my catechism, prayer is a conversation with God, right? It's a conversation with God, and conversations involve speaking, where we say to God, these are the things I need, etc, etc, and listening, yeah, where we sit quietly. And again, I want to repeat that we sit quietly and let God speak to us. So when we engage in meditation, yeah, sitting quietly either with the Bible or something else, and just being in silence, yeah, again, that's a very, very powerful thing that can activate our parietal lobe and, yeah, in a sense, kickstart healing in our bodies. There is this whole talk nowadays of something called gratitude, and having the spirit of, or the living with gratitude. All right, so you go around telling people I'm grateful. You go telling yourself about what grateful thing you are. You know, it's called count your blessings in a sense. You count your blessings, all right? And with this, there's a whole other science around something we call mindfulness. Yeah, mindfulness is about being here, being knowing what it is that you're feeling currently, being able to know to name what it is that you're feeling, taking time, for example, to appreciate when somebody holds you or touches you. Yeah, like when you shake somebody's hand, yeah, is the hand warm, is it cold? Yeah, being able to be in the moment. Yeah, one of the mindful practices, for example, I encourage a lot of my clients to do is to walk on grass and just feel the grass and the ground massaging your feet. Yeah, something as easy as that. Taking time to be in nature, and not just being in nature, then you're walking and then, you know, you're letting your mind, but being present, feeling the wind, smelling the flowers, noticing the butterflies, you know, being at the moment. All right. Then, of course, I've already mentioned being in nature, because that's a very powerful thing. Just being in nature, again, is very good for activating the parietal lobe. Yeah. Exercise. Now we know that the most powerful antidepressant medication there is today on this earth is exercise. It cannot be, there's no other way of putting it. If the benefits of exercise were put together and put in a pill, I mean, it is the best antidepressant medication that there is. Yeah, the benefits of exercise are tremendous, from improving concentration, improving your well-being, lowering blood pressure, etc, etc, etc. So exercise. And then, of course, with exercise, I like talking about stretches. You know how you stretch? Yeah, and even those of us who are here and listening to me right now, you know, you can stretch and just feel different muscles. Yeah, tense and relax your body, and just let that feeling, that nice feeling, come out of you. Okay, another very, very simple way of beginning to activate the parietal lobe. So, can I conclude? Yeah. So we have this part of the brain called the parietal lobe, right? It is activated specifically when we engage in activities that nourish our spiritual life, our religious lives. Things like prayer, things like being grateful, things like praise and worship, right? Now, when we activate that part of the brain, we also activate healing within our body. Okay? And we need to do that by exercise, praying, meditating, and being grateful. Thank you. I'll see you another time when we can talk more about other things around mental health. Asante.